I think Canadians have sent us a message of humility. The second one is they want to bring people together.
I think people are seeking unity in the country, that there isn't much of an appetite for division.
We need to listen to each other and to find out what it is that we need to do better next time.
This is a moment to gather amongst friends to reflect on the experiences we had over the past few months, connecting with Canadians, hearing directly from Canadians, and understanding what Canadians told us about the need to work hard every day and work together to respond to their concerns.
Yesterday, it was the Tories. Today, it's the Liberals getting together here in Ottawa for the first time since the federal election to reflect on the campaign that was. The CBC's Salima Shivji has been hearing from many of them today. She joins us now in studio. Hi, Salima.
Hey.
Especially the Prime Minister. We just heard from the Prime Minister. What more did he have to say?
Yeah, so you heard him say that word reflect. He said that quite a few times as he talked to reporters as he headed into this meeting, about reflecting very much about what went wrong, how to move forward in this new reality, obviously a minority situation. 20 seats lost, about 1 million votes lost as well for the Liberal Party. So the Prime Minister talked about saying goodbye and thank you to a lot of those people that aren't coming back, those 20 people, some of them some pretty high-profile names, some ministers losing their positions in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Also, he talked about why and how the party lost ground in Quebec into the Bloc Québécois. So Trudeau talked about working together, working on unity, as you heard from those clips off the top there as well. Also asked about how to address that big hole of no representation in two of those provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, about that growing anger and frustration in those places, and here's what he had to say on that.
That continues to be a significant issue that we're talking about, that I've been reaching out to premiers, to mayors, to business leaders, to colleagues and former colleagues on. There's a lot of work to do to make sure that we're governing for the entire country.
It sound a bit like a prepared answer, like he was ready for that question somehow, but the sense of a lot more work to do was a bit consistent in what he had to say about working together, listening to the caucus a little bit more perhaps. And he was also asked about when Parliament will come back, and he says he'll be talking to opposition leaders about that next week, and they will decide. So a decision has not yet been made whether it'll be December or January.
Okay, and he was also, of course, meeting with Liberal MPs, new, re-elected, those who are now who were not re-elected. What did some of them have to say?
Yeah, a lot of them were talking about, asking questions about what went wrong or what happened in this campaign. A lot of Quebec MPs were talking about perhaps why the Liberal Party was surprised by the rise of popularity in the Bloc Québécois, eating into Liberal support there. The need for analysis on that. Also, Bill 21, the religious neutrality bill, whether that had an effect at all. When a defeated MP, David Graham, actually talked about that, and he said that was a factor, but whether it was or not, so be it. That was perhaps a good thing because the Liberal Party took more of a stand on that, left the door open to possible federal intervention. So let's talk about that. Also, some keen to actually tell their colleagues and PMs what they heard at the door and what were some of those major issues, including John Eldeg, who was defeated in the BC riding of Cloverdale-Langley City. Take a listen.
There was a bit of blowback from SNC-Lavalin. We simply couldn't shake that. I kept hearing from everybody that they were unhappy with all of the leaders, but I heard over and over again that they saw ours as the best of the option and liked our policies. But in the end, I think there was just a bit of blowback at politicians in general.
So that idea of blowback from politicians in general and whether leadership styles have to change perhaps going forward.
The Prime Minister referenced it, but the idea that the Liberals are shut out from Winnipeg to Vancouver, the concept of Western alienation, no bigger name. Many people lost, Liberals lost, but no bigger name lost than Ralph Goodale. He spoke out today as well.
Of course, yeah, and that compounds the problem for the Liberals there, that they don't have the Goodales, who's been such a high-profile minister, been around for decades here in Ottawa. So such a shift for him. He talked about that and talked about unity, that same sort of idea of working together, but also what he was hearing and that frustration, how to tap into that and how to address it for the Liberal Party. Here's what Ralph Goodale had to say on that.
People were obviously concerned about economic uncertainty. That is the issue that was raising the anxiety level across Western Canada, and it will be very important for the government to provide the necessary reassurance with respect to economic security and growth and prosperity in the future, that Western Canadians can enjoy and celebrate just like everybody else across the country.
He was also asked about what he's going to be doing actually after this, and he says he's just focusing on the transition from minister to private citizen and is focused on his staff, and he's just looking to help out in any way.
All right, thank you, Salima. The CBC's Salima Shivji with that update. So what was the mood inside the room like, and how are Liberals preparing for a minority parliament? Marco Mendicino is a re-elected Ontario Liberal MP, and he joins us now. Hi, Mr. Mendicino. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you,
back again. Back again.
That's right.
So we were talking with Salima about the idea of reflection. When you are reflecting, and I know congratulations on winning your seat, but when you are reflecting on your party's performance and the fact that the party lost its majority, what do you think went wrong?
Well, first, it is great to be back, and I'm exceedingly grateful to the good people of Eglinton Lawrence for re-electing me. And I think we've all been doing a lot of reflecting, as the Prime Minister has said. I just came from an informal meeting, a get-together of a number of our colleagues. There were some congratulations, and there are also some au revoir, some goodbyes. And so as we continue to reflect, I think that there are a few broad strokes that we are going to use to channel our energies going forward. One is obviously to look for ways to cooperate and to collaborate with the opposition. And you've heard the Prime Minister talk about reaching out to leaders of the opposition.
Has that happened?
It is in the course of happening. And obviously, in addition to that, looking at some of the broader priorities which have been supported by the vast majority of Canadians around climate change and around addressing the challenges of affordability. So we look forward to having that dialogue with the opposition and then getting back to work for Canadians.
I want to get to those priorities, those shared priorities in a second. But first, a question that I asked Mark Strahl, who was here yesterday. So many questions right now about the level of responsibility the leader of each party is taking in what happened to their party over the course of this election. I know that your party won, but you lost 20 seats. How much responsibility should the Prime Minister bear for that?
Well, I think we all want to see a tenor and a type of discourse in politics that focuses on rigorous and vigorous debate around ideas and less about the politics of personal attack. So we want to keep politics a constructive forum to achieve important results, as I said, as it relates to the challenges of climate change, as it relates to affordability. And I heard that at the doorstep, certainly in many of the thousands of doors that I knocked at and the conversations that I had, is that the people really want parties to find common ground. And we're going to make every sincere effort to try and find that common ground. And yes, that does start at the top with leadership.
With respect, that doesn't really answer the question, though, about how much responsibility the Prime Minister should bear. I mean, we're talking about SNC, pictures of himself emerging in blackface. Has he, when he spoke to caucus, has he taken, and again, the same question I asked of the Conservatives about Andrew Scheer, has he taken responsibility for the losses that your party incurred?
I think we've seen a lot of strength from the Prime Minister and at very important junctures, both in the campaign and over the course of the last 4 years. But I also think that from the Prime Minister, that whenever he has been attacked personally, he has put the focus back on the business of Canadians, which is to put the focus on climate change.
You don't think your party or he attacked the Conservatives in this election for personal reasons?
I think we showed, certainly from the leadership point of view, we showed a lot of focus. And this is a recurring pattern that we've seen over the course of not only the Prime Minister's career in politics, but over the course of his life, that when personal attacks have been flung his way, he's put focus back onto the work of the people.
I'm not saying a personal attack. There's pictures
of
him that emerged in blackface. He was in blackface. It's not a personal attack to talk about that.
No, and as I said, I think you did hear accountability from the Prime Minister at that juncture, and then to reflect on that by reaching out to community leaders, and then to digest that and to use that to redouble our efforts to close gap around systemic barriers, to ensure that we are addressing the challenges of climate change and affordability. And I have great confidence and optimism that we are going to be able to achieve some very important results in this next Parliament. Minority parliaments can work, and they can work when parties offer themselves the opportunity to find ways to cooperate.
Okay, let me ask you about some of those priorities that you identified, and chief among them, climate change. You mentioned that the vast majority of Canadians, I think it's more than 2/3 of Canadians, ended up voting for a party that supports, for example, the federal carbon tax. The large majority of people who did not vote for that party live in Saskatchewan and Alberta, where your party was completely shut out. Are you open to conversations with, for example, Premier Moe, who's asking for a pause on the backstop right now? Particularly, even the leader of the opposition in that province is asking for the same pause because of the impact on farmers in Saskatchewan. How much are you willing to acknowledge that some of your policies affect people differently in different parts of the country?
Well, first, we have maintained the position, a principal position that is borne out by the evidence, that we should put a price on pollution, and that is an essential feature, as both the Ontario Court of Appeal and the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal have held. And obviously there are...
Those decisions are being appealed, but yes,
they
you're
are.
right.
So, but we maintain that that is an essential feature of any responsible plan when it comes to meeting the challenges of climate change. In addition to that, the Prime Minister has also made a concerted effort to begin to reach out to Western Canada. He's reached out to Mayor Nenshi, Mayor Iveson from Calgary and from Edmonton. He's appointed, as you know, Anne McClellan, former Liberal minister from Alberta, to really show the beginning, certainly not the end, but the beginning of a dialogue, to do that outreach to Western Canada, to listen, to reflect, and to find common ground if we can.
How far does that outreach go? And I say this with no disrespect to Mayor Iveson or Mayor Nenshi, but there are a lot of people in Alberta who say that they don't necessarily represent their views, right?
Well, as I said, it's the beginning of, I believe, an exercise in good faith to do outreach. And I don't believe it ends with him. I think the Prime Minister and the rest of our government is going to make a concerted effort to really go out to Western Canada, listen to the concerns, listen to the frustration, and to try and really reflect on what are the important priorities that they expect this government to work on, be it when it comes to challenges around climate change, be it when it comes to achieving important results and progress as it relates to the energy sector as well.
When you are reflecting on the result that your party had in Western Canada, and not as much BC, I'm speaking particularly, I know we get offensive BCers when we say out west, so specifically in Alberta and Saskatchewan, how much of the issue is the policies that your party put forward? Like, how much reflection is being done? I know that you guys keep saying we're reaching out, we're talking to people there, but whenever we talk to people there, they're saying it's things like Bill C-69 and Bill C-48. We feel as though there is an effort underway to undermine the industry that is so crucial to our livelihoods. Is there any sort of responsibility on the part of your party for the way in which those policies were rolled out and the types of policies that you rolled out?
Well, I think in the course of these conversations, there'll be an effort to try and close the gap between what is the perception and what is the reality of the work that we've done legislatively and the policies that we are trying to.
Wrong?
What I'm saying is I think it's important to try and to begin by listening and to really go away and take that feedback and to try and weave it into our legislative agenda. I believe that there is a real well of good faith to try and listen to not only Western Canada, but to every region in Canada, because we will achieve our best results when we are working together, not only among federal parties, but also when it comes to cooperating with the provinces and the municipalities as well.
So does that mean that your government is potentially open for conversations on, for example, new legislation that would address some of their concerns where pipeline bottlenecks are concerned, or revisiting the equalization formula? Is that something you're open to? Well,
it's not for me to usurp the role of the government. I mean, it'll be for the government, the new government, which will be sworn in.
As an MP, what's your position?
I think my position is, and I think this is the position of the government, and the two are consistent, is that we should begin by listening. And we should also build on the successes that we have achieved over the last 4 years and try and really work together and to cooperate.
I guess I just wonder, like, what do you mean by listening? So how long will you listen for before some action is taken? Because we've interviewed mayor after mayor after mayor on this show, and I'm not trying to diminish what you're saying, but they want some action.
Right. So, look, we are in the very early days after the election, and obviously there needs to be some outreach with opposition leaders. I think it starts there. You've also heard about some outreach to the region as well, and I think that is a process that will unfold. But I don't think there should be any doubt that we are going to do our level best to try and cooperate so that we can achieve the best results when it comes to the environment and the economy.
When is Parliament coming back? This year or next year?
That's a very good question, and I'm sure when the answer becomes public, you'll be among the first to know, Vashi.
Just among. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mendicino. Pleasure to have you here as always.
Good to be back.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Power in Politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stopped to speak with reporters before heading into a meeting of re-elected and defeated Liberal MPs today. He was asked about his leadership and what his message is to the defeated MPs. Take a listen.
Will you be the leader of the Liberals into the next election?
That is certainly my plan, yes.
Prime Minister,
as you know, I will be meeting with a range of all the opposition leaders next week, and that will be part of the conversations that we'll have around what they, when they think we should be returning and what kind of work we're going to be able to do together. That continues to be a significant issue that we're talking about, that I've been reaching out to premiers, to mayors, to business leaders, to colleagues and former colleagues on. There's a lot of work to do to make sure that we're governing for the entire country.
What is your message to defeated MPs? Is there anything you could have done differently?
I think the first message is a message of gratitude. They stepped up to an extraordinary degree over the past 4 years, and what we were able to accomplish as a team for Canadians was significant, and they will be a part of that forever in terms of the big things we were able to do. But obviously there's a lot more to do, and there's a lot more work to be done for Canadians, both within Parliament and without Parliament.
Merci beaucoup. So what does it all mean? Time, of course, for the Power Panel. In Vancouver, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Stockwell Day. Marcella Monroe of KTG Public Affairs joins us from Calgary. And next to me here in studio, Tim Murphy, Managing Director of Macmillan Vantage, and the CBC's own Aaron Wary. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Tim, why don't I start with you?
Sure.
What do you read into what the Prime Minister said there? Are there signals that things are going to be different? How do you read it?
Well, I think there have been some signals that, and you've heard some various caucus members throughout the day in the lead up and after the session speak to a bit of, obviously it's a kind of a mixed emotions day. I mean, there are people there who are celebrating coming back, as we saw Marco Mendicino just on your show, and others who obviously didn't win and defeated candidates. And so I think, it's a minority, so there is a certain degree of mixed messages for Liberals. They got 157 seats, but they didn't get a majority. I think they're already thinking about what that means for themselves. I think you have seen some humility post-election from the Prime Minister. I think obviously, though, as you look forward, there are some real challenges, right? I mean, we've got a Western alienation problem, but a significant amount of the country that wants significant and real action on climate change. And there's, what the box of solutions are that is not evident. And so I think, right now they're in the throes of deciding cabinet, and I think that'll be an important message, but it won't be, that won't be the end of it. And obviously I do think the meeting with opposition leaders is an important part of what to do and to figure out whether there's a way to work together. Calm some of that feeling of anxiety and difference that's out there, and find a way to build a parliament that works.
Marcella, what do you read into the comments that we just heard from the Prime Minister, and what would you identify as they look forward the biggest challenge for the Liberals?
Well, there's not much there to play with, Vashi, as we heard. There wasn't a lot of news there. So I'm struggling to figure out what I think of it. Look, I think what would be important, if I can say one thing to my Liberal friends who have, just gotten the seats for a minority government, I would say the situation in Western Canada is pretty bad. And so I would hope that they will say something sooner rather than later to try and start to address some of the toxicity that is in Alberta right now. I'm a pretty glass is half full type of gal, but I have to say that the mood here in Calgary is pretty bad. And I think that what Calgarians, Albertans want to hear, and by the way, the majority of Albertans also believe climate change is a serious problem, and that's something we have to deal with. So let's not act like we're such outliers here. There were over 10,000 people at the rally with Greta Thunberg in Edmonton just a few weeks ago. So we're not, these loony Wexiters that look good on TV, but aren't really the heart of what's going on in Alberta. We're very frustrated, obviously. The commodity shift has been very hard on working Albertans. And the Prime Minister and the people he chooses for cabinet need to pretty quickly send a signal here that they're going to be a part of this solution. I was part of a government that was trying to warn them about Bill C-69 and Bill C-48, and they didn't really listen to us, to be honest, when I was with the Notley government. And so they have to show that they understand those concerns, and they should do it pretty quickly, regardless of how he makes his cabinet.
Stockwell, what would you identify as the biggest challenge ahead of the Liberals right now?
Well, a couple. First of all, MPs should be remembering, and sure, it's good to get together and mourn your losses, but MPs shouldn't go on too long about, the grief they're in now because a friend lost their job as an MP. There's tens of thousands of Canadians at work right now. At a minimum, about 40,000 in Alberta alone. And most people who've been thrown out of a job this year don't have the kind of support packages that are there for MPs who've just lost a seat. So I think they should let's keep the tears, in the caucus rooms and be thinking about how we get Canadians re-employed. The fact that almost daily we're hearing announcements of another company moving to the U.S. or moving, in fact, to some other country altogether. And this isn't just big business pulling out. These are jobs for real Canadians that are being lost. So, have your hug in and wipe your tears, and really everybody pull together and get to work here. And the message, as far as Western alienation, as it's being called, is there going to be separation in Canada? Well, I don't think you can ever fully dismiss that. But no Prime Minister wants to have around his or her neck the fact that a referendum was held in a province. And I can tell you, if a referendum was held in Alberta today on the question, that's something you don't want to think about in terms of where the numbers would go. So it's time to get really serious about pulling together and seeing if the needs can be met. And look, I have to say, I've read a number of columnists over this last week from, I'll use the term, Central Canada. And you know what their line is? You know what their line is? It's, oh yeah, Alberta, here they go again. I'll tell you what, those of us who are involved in domestic relationships and your partner is upset about something and you roll your eyes and you say, here we go again, how does that work for you? I'd like some of those, I'm upset about that. I'd like some of those smug columnists maybe trot out to Alberta and talk to some of the people who've lost their jobs, and they probably won't be saying, here they go again. I hope that's not the attitude in Parliament. I don't think it will be, even among the Liberals, but I hope it's not.
Point taken. Aaron, let me circle back and kind of try and tie this all together, because I actually thought that what we just listened to from Catherine McKenna there, who did serve as the Minister of Environment, was indicative of something that, Tim, you highlighted, and that is that the box of tools to address the sort of disparate interests that are being sort of reflected in the outcome of the election results is kind of a narrow one. And she was talking about how, on the one hand, you have people marching in the streets to demand more action on climate change. On the other hand, you have provinces full of people who are worried that they will be left out of whatever the government decides to do and that their livelihood is at stake. And she said, well, we have to have empathy, but there wasn't much more offered beyond that. And you could tell there was even sort of a sense of, I don't know how to properly characterize it, but maybe frustration or a lack of definition there about what they might do. How big of an issue do you think this is going to be for the government moving forward?
I mean, it's existential for the country, and to a certain extent, I guess, for this government too, that it was always going to get to this point, right, where the climate agenda and the resource economy were going to run up against each other, and you were going to have to start figuring out how to make those two things go together. The Prime Minister has obviously tried in his own way to make those two things come together, in large part aggravating people on the environmental side by saying we're going to go ahead and build a pipeline. He hasn't been able to knit it together in some way where the Liberals win 20 seats in Alberta and everybody's happy. I think that there's some risk here for them in trying, immediately after the election, we all threw out ideas like, oh, well, why don't they just appoint someone from Senate? And I think very quickly people sort of realized, okay, that's, these kind of small moves of symbolic kind of moves aren't going to really change anything. But as I think the minister was hinting at it, as I think you're hinting at, is you, at the other hand, you can't just pull back on the environmental platform entirely and scrap it. So they've got to figure out a way that addresses concerns in real ways without backtracking on the general direction they want to move in, which is to move forward on climate change to reduce emissions. They have to figure out a way that addresses real concerns, but isn't backtracking, isn't retreating from the agenda.
Let me ask you, Tim, though, how hard is that? And I'm thinking of exactly what I asked Marco Mendicino, because there was, is there any, like, it's to Marcella's point, it's not just people there saying appoint somebody, or, they would like to have more than just a listening tour. Yeah. They would like to see some action. But when I asked, are you willing to look at the policies that people in Alberta and Saskatchewan feel, like Marcella highlighted, C69, C48, feel directly impacted their livelihoods, he wouldn't go so far as to say, yes, we will.
Yeah, and I agreed. And that there's whether there is a narrow way to knit those two together is a real question. It's going to take some hard work. I think, It's not common that you would say in any government the job of natural resources and environment may be the most difficult jobs in government. I think they will be in this next session. Normally those are finance and other positions, but that kind of knitting together those two things in a way that works for decidedly disparate parts of the country with geographies and natural resource allocations that are totally different is really problematic. Now, that being said, at the end of the day, it's going to require some goodwill by some of these affected provinces because, the carbon pricing is a backstop to what kind of action plan the provinces themselves have and had. Like Ontario had a cap and trade program, which the government was happy to live with, and then the Doug Ford government took it away, and that's when the backstop came in place. So, arguably we saw,
There are some specifics, like in Saskatchewan right now, even the leader of the NDP is saying, can you give farmers a break on this backstop because their crops are so wet, they're disproportionately having to pay too much.
Right, so okay, fair enough. So what's Saskatchewan's climate change plan that's going to work? What's Alberta's climate change plan that's going to work? That's going to say it's going to need movement on both sides if this is going to work for everybody. Maybe there isn't a way to meet in the middle. Right. And that's a big challenge. But I think both sides need some effort to make that happen.
I have time for a quick final word from both Marcella and Stockwell. Marcella, you first. What do you think about that?
I think that Tim's friends need to take a close look at the two long letters with amendment suggestions for C-48 and C-69 that the Notley government had sent them. And they should see if some of that is something they could stomach. There are concrete things that the government I was a part of suggested to the Liberal government that they didn't heed, and that's part of the real challenge that we're facing. There is a quite, in my view, economic and environmental rationale for how you weave these two issues together, both climate change and the need to support our resource industry. And frankly, the Liberals just need to start listening to people who have those solutions.
Stockwell?
Yeah, this was, Prime Minister keeps saying this election was all about the climate, and then he, kind of still cheers for himself. Well, if it was all about the climate and people really think the world is coming to an end in 10 years, 9 o'clock at night, 9:30 in Newfoundland, if that was really the case, you wouldn't have think that the Liberals would have lost so many seats and lost, in fact, the majority vote. And in fact, in British Columbia, which is quite and properly environmentally sensitive, there was a gain of Conservatives. So I think it's time for people to put away just their quick formulas, like say a carbon tax is going to work, and really think about the fact that here you've got the head of an NDP party in Saskatchewan writing and saying, yeah, I kind of like the carbon tax, but tell you what, could you ease off the farmers because it's really hurting them? Well, it's hurting a lot of people. So it's time to do a bit of a reset and a rethink and really pull together on this one.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.